And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, Indiana wins its second of two exhibition games, this one over the University of Indianapolis, by a final score of 76-63. I think after the first exhibition game, we were all just excited to have basketball to talk about after the tumult of the week that preceded that game. And so really just any IU victory was gonna be a pleasant surprise, was gonna make us all excited, and we got that. And I think tonight, even though the competition stepped up a little bit, I feel like we were searching for a little bit more. And while Indiana did have a great 22-0 run to end the first half, where it played some really nice basketball on both ends of the floor, University of Indianapolis actually outscored Indiana by one in the second half. And so it was kind of a lackluster second half. We're going to break all of that down tonight, talk about why that was, and perhaps what weaknesses in this Indiana team were pointed out. Because while we could all get very excited after the first exhibition game, I think tonight's game was a little bit more of a kind of cold water splash in the face that this team has some real weaknesses, even with a depleted roster. But this team has some real weaknesses that it's going to have to figure out to compete when it gets into the upper echelon of the Big Ten. But we don't start out the show with pessimism. We always start out the show with optimism. We start out with our banner moment, which is the moment from tonight's game that leads us to believe that the Hoosiers are on the right path for their sixth banner. And for me, it actually came in the first half. I thought early on, you could just look at the score, that Indiana was sluggish, and the University of Indianapolis held an 8 to 10 point lead there for a while in the first half. But there was a sequence there in the second half, and let me pull up my notes just so I have it correct. But there was a sequence there when Indiana was down 28 to 20, and they had gotten it to 23-20, and then we saw what we saw a lot of times last year, where Indiana made a little run, and then a lapse on defense and a bad turnover gave the other team a quick 5-0 run. So Indianapolis actually went up 28-20. And, of course, there was the technical foul, which helped to swing some momentum in Indiana's direction. But I thought after that, Yogi Ferrell had one of the better sequences I've seen him have, just in terms of leadership by effort. I thought he made a three, which certainly helped, and then he played some great defense where he was really hustling, battling strong for position, and ended up forcing a travel. And on the very next possession was the huge dunk by James Blackman Jr. that everybody's going to be talking about and will be the big highlight that you'll see. But the unsung play in that possession was tremendous hustle by Yogi to get the offensive rebound that then set up the dunk by James Blackman Jr. And so I thought at a point where Indiana was reeling a little bit in the first half, I believe there were 10 minutes gone in the first half by that point, and University of Indianapolis is still exerting control over the game. Indiana needed something, and I thought Yogi stepped up, showed some leadership by effort, by making the effort play on defense, by making the effort play on the offensive glass. That helped spark the team. That pushed Indiana onto its 22-0 run, and they were really able to cruise from there, and perhaps cruise too much, which we'll get into, because they never really put their foot on the throat of the University of Indianapolis in the second half when they had the chance to put a lot of distance between them. But we will talk about all of that on this episode of the Assembly Call. I haven't even introduced myself. How rude. I'm Jerod Morris, your host on the Assembly Call. I'm joined tonight by Ryan Phillips. Andy Bottoms is still serving his 4-game suspension, so he will again join us for the SMU game. But anyway, that is my banner moment. The positive part about tonight's game, and there are a few others, Rob Johnson, namely among them, and we'll talk about them. But before we do that, let's go over to Ryan and let him kick off tonight's show with his rant.
Yeah, I think tonight, like you said, up and down, good and bad. It was a typical preseason game, in my opinion. Maybe didn't put the foot on the throat like we wanted to, but I thought there were definitely some positives and some negatives. I thought Robert Johnson was fantastic. He wound up with a double-double, 15 points, 10 rebounds, a steal, only 2 turnovers, and he was handling the ball a lot. And then also he was 6 or 6 from the field, so he wasn't just firing up shots to make those 15 points. So I thought he was the key to the game, and I thought he played very well. I think one of the things you got to look at, though, as you were saying, with a thin roster, maybe that had something to do with this. You got Yogi, Robert Johnson both playing 35 minutes, and you've got James Blackman playing 33, Nick Zeisloff playing 30. an exhibition game, that's pretty ridiculous, and that's just an indication again of how shorthanded they are. And I think that had that wore them down in the second half a little bit. You just saw tired legs. You saw guys who maybe aren't used to playing that much, playing more than they will during the regular season. So I think that that had a little bit to do with the lackluster late, especially late in the second half. I thought midway through the second half they had the game put away. They were up by a decent amount, and it was pretty much over. And then real late, even in the minutes where they're just trying to run the string out, you still had Johnson and Blackman out there on the floor because there's really nobody to replace them. So yeah, I thought it was a solid performance to get the win, and weather a storm early where University of Indianapolis was hitting everything from the field. And really, if they shoot like that, they're going to beat anybody they play. If they shoot like they did in the first 5 minutes, they're going to beat anybody they play. So I thought we weathered the storm, kind of got through it, and by the end of the first half, really had the game in hand.
Folks out there listening, if you want to comment, you can send a tweet with the hashtag assemblycall. We will be able to pull it up here and discuss it on the show. You can also go to the YouTube page, and if you go to assemblycall.com/live, the link for the YouTube page is right there, so you can go there and get in on the show chat or just click on the video that you see. So you mentioned something interesting, Ryan, the shooting of the University of Indianapolis. I mean, through the first 5 minutes of the game, they were scoring 1.8 points per possession, which clearly is unsustainable, and it was a function of them shooting well, but also us giving up a lot of open shots. So I'm going to tell you my main concern, and let's just jump into it right now. I mean, there were a few of them. I mean, look, the turnovers tonight were not good. Whereas Indiana had a great turnover percentage of 10-something in the first game, it was up to 26.9 tonight, and there were a lot of the careless turnovers that we saw last year that plagued this team. The rebounding was not good at all. Alex Bozich of Inside the Hall had a great tweet late in the second half. I think Indiana had given up, just some ridiculous amount of offensive rebounds. Indianapolis, for the game, collected 46% of their offensive rebounds, which is simply a number that's unsustainable if Indiana is going to compete in the Big Ten. Indianapolis also out-rebounded Indiana on the defensive glass as well. But most concerning for me is the amount of open three-point looks that Indiana gave up. It really seemed on defense for the majority of the game, outside of the 22-0 run, when really everything was clicking on both ends, it seemed like Indiana was too content to kind of pack it in, give up open threes, and just hope they missed, which fortunately they did. But when you get into the Big Ten with capable shooters, guys are going to knock those down. And I continue to be concerned about this because Tom Crean, again, he mentioned it as a point of emphasis, and it just doesn't seem to be something that the team is carrying out onto the court. So of those three big issues that I highlighted from tonight, which one is the most concerning for you, and what can this team do to guard shooters better?
I think that the guarding the three-point line is the most important because teams in the Big Ten can shoot. And the question really, and we don't really know, is were they kind of allowing them to take those shots and encouraging them to take those shots? I mean, University of Indianapolis wound up shooting 22.2% from three. So was it a function of them allowing them to do that, or was it we're just not good at guarding threes? We won't really know.
Hold on. But you don't game plan for an exhibition, do you? I mean, you do your stuff. Like, whether Indianapolis is good at shooting threes, don't you do what you're going to do rather than say they're not good at shooting threes, we'll let them?
See, I think when you're as thin as we are on the interior, you might say, hey, let's slack off the shooters and help, so Honor doesn't get just destroyed inside. I don't know that. I mean, it could just be allowing them, encouraging a lower-level team to shoot threes. That said, we won't really know. I mean, I'm saying it could be that. I don't know if that is that.
Yeah.
But also, you wind up giving up so many offensive rebounds from long threes. Maybe you want to stop encouraging teams to shoot the three like that because it leads to long rebounds, and your post guy is not going to be able to grab those. Those are going to be distance rebounds that offensive players are going to be more likely to grab. So I think that it's the rebounding, I think, is actually the most concerning. Whereas the getting on a three-point shooters, we won't know for a couple weeks. I don't think whether that's going to be a chronic problem, especially you're missing Stan Robinson, one of your better perimeter defenders, and we don't know how Troy Williams is going to be closing out on shooters this year. That he had problems with that last year, so we'll really know more about this team in a few games. But I think the rebounding, I mean, closing out to shooters is very concerning. But I do think the rebounding is the big thing. Can people other than Hunter Perea grab rebounds? Robert Johnson was great tonight, but he can't do it himself. Yogi only had 2 boards. James Blackman only had 3. Zaislav only had 4. I mean, he was off the entire game. Hartman was very active. I liked how he played, but, he only grabbed 2 rebounds. And at 6'7", if you're going to play that many minutes, you need to do some work on the glass as well. So.
All right, so here's an interesting question from Joel Nost, at King Nost on Twitter. And we can't pull it up here. You got to use the hashtag assembly call. He tweeted to us, though. And he asked, could guards crashing the glass, as seems to be an emphasis, be a cause for lack of perimeter defense? Which is an interesting question because we know the guards have to rebound for this team to be successful, but that also means they need to focus on getting into the paint more, and that may make them a little bit more reluctant or unable to get out on shooters. Is that going to be kind of a constant push and pull for this team this year? Is that to rebound, we need the guards in there, but we also need the guards out there defending the three-point shooter?
I don't think that's going to be a problem because, frankly, the best way to rebound is to block your guy out and the ball will come to you. If the ball comes to you, you get it. So I don't think that should really be a concern.
Whether you're 20 feet from the basket or 5 feet from the basket.
I don't think it's going to matter because if you have that lane cleared by blocking your guy out, the ball's not going to get taken by somebody else. If everyone's doing their job and blocking out, that ball won't go to anybody else. So you just have to trust your teammates and not wander off your guy to go get the ball. I think that, again, the three-point, you're going to see teams shoot a lot of threes on us probably, especially early because we're going to be playing an up-tempo game. So you're going to see teams playing our style of basketball and firing threes before they start to work inside, just as a tendency of the way the speed of the game. So you're going to have to make sure your guards are blocking those guys out so they don't get rebounds coming to them. And we're not going to be able to let teams get second and third chances this year because of how thin we are in the post, because eventually those teams are going to run offense and throw it down on the block. And, no matter how good Hunter Perea is defensively, I think he's been solid so far in these 2 exhibition games, but no matter how good he winds up being, if they're punishing him constantly down the floor, he's going to struggle.
So let's talk a little bit about Hunter because he is clearly the guy. I mean, he goes into the season as the key to the season, and he becomes even more important with the injury to Devin Davis. And quick update, if you haven't heard about Devin Davis, he has been moved to a rehabilitation center in Indianapolis. So it sounds like there has been some positive progress there. Obviously, a lot more to go, and we continue to wish him well. His absence makes Hunter's presence and Hunter's development even more important. We are seeing a pattern here with Hunter through the first 2 games, and again, all caveats for it. It's the competition level and that it's the exhibition season, but Hunter has come out in each of the first 2 games, and I thought played really, really poor the first 5 minutes. I mean, the first few possessions in this game, he was terrible. I mean, he gave up an offensive rebound for a bucket, had 2 bad fouls, one on the offensive end, had a turnover. It seems like I don't know, he just doesn't seem into the game early, but after that first TV timeout, he really seems to settle in. And perhaps one of the more encouraging stats of the whole game is 2 fouls on Hunter Perea because he had 2 fouls within the first few minutes of the game. And everybody on Twitter is up in arms. Oh, no, what do we do now? Is it good that we get to play without Hunter for 2 fouls, or is this good because he can now learn to play with 2 fouls? What's going on? And he ended the game with 2 fouls. So he clearly did a good job playing a lot of minutes the rest of the game, not picking up another foul, and being active. I mean, he had 14 points. He had 8 boards. So, again, it was another productive game for Hunter. But, I think it's a little concerning that he's struggling out of the gates. And look, Hunter is what he is at this point. He's not going to be a guy that you just dump it to down low and that is going to, put post moves on and be a threat from the post. So it's been kind of a mixed bag. I think overall, to me, I'm encouraged because I don't think we saw the consistent stretches of play from him even in exhibition-level competition the last few years. So the fact that he had a double-double in the first game and 14 points, 8 boards in this game, it shows that he's producing against guys he should be producing against. But what kind of carryover will there be when the height and athleticism evens out and he's going up against guys that aren't Division II level competition?
Yeah, I think that's a big concern. Can he sustain production against? I mean, because if he gets 14 and 8 during the Big Ten season, Indiana's going to be fine. I mean, this is a great team if you do that. I don't think anybody's expecting that right now. The question is, how quickly does he get better and does he continue to develop? Again, very encouraging tonight, some of the things we saw. Yeah, he started slow, but then settled down, like you said, like the last game, settled down, played very solid, especially defensively. I thought he was a nuisance defensively for some of those guys driving in, and encouraged jump shots, which Indiana's going to want this year. You don't want guards getting in and being able to dish it to the big men when Hunter has to move to help out. I think the most encouraging thing tonight, though, was 8 of 10 from the free throw line for Perea. He shot 72% last year, I believe. But in the first game, he kind of struggled from the line. If he's making 8 of 10 free throws and can get to the line enough just with his activity level, whether it's stuff away from the ball or whether it's going up strong on the offensive end, if he's getting 10 free throws a game, that is a very good thing for Indiana. Again, it's hard to tell with the competition level and things like that, how he really will be when we get into the meat of Big Ten play. But I think that, again, another encouraging sort of small step forward to see him active, see him play with 2 fouls, and honestly, for Tom Crean to leave him out there with 2 in the first half. I mean, I think everybody thought for sure he'd be out, but hey, it's an exhibition game. What do you have to lose? You don't really have much behind him on the interior. Tim Priller's not going to come out and be able to shut things down. So I think it was really encouraging to say, hey, go out there and play with 2 fouls and be smart, instead of, hey, sit on the bench for the rest of the first half, because that really doesn't gain you anything in an exhibition game. So again, like you said, there were encouraging signs. The first 5 minutes were not kind to Hunter, but I thought that the rest of the game, he played a solid game. Isn't, like you said, not going to dominate games, not going to take over games at this point, but hopefully this is another step forward for him.
Let's talk about Nick Zeisloft real quick, a guy who obviously was terrific in that first game and came back to earth a little bit tonight. He had 4 points, 4 rebounds. I don't know how many turnovers he had because I don't have those stats up in front of me, but there was a decent amount of them. I know there was a time I tweeted in the first half that, when Zeisloft gets the ball inside in the paint, bad things are happening. And I thought he tried to do a little bit too much in the first half. He was kind of driving in and getting lost without anywhere to go with the basketball, instead of letting the more capable guys like Yogi and Rob Johnson and James Blackman Jr. handle that part of it and kind of get set up for his shot, which is going to be his role on this team. And, so a lot of people have talked about Zeisloft in the offseason. He did well in Canada. He's been a guy that I don't think they're totally sure yet what to expect, and certainly that first exhibition game was a great sign that he'll be productive, and I do think he'll be productive. But let me use this opportunity to talk about my concerns with Nick Zeisloft, which is that when the competition ratchets up a little bit and when the game gets a little bit faster, I feel like he may struggle a little bit, because while he is a very good shooter and he has a reputation for taking care of the basketball, I think jumping up a level to playing a little bit faster where the athletes are a little bit better for a guy who isn't that athletic is going to lead to some struggles for him. And I don't know if that was the issue tonight, because that's going to be an issue I think that will come up more in our bigger non-conference games in the Big Ten season. But it seemed like maybe he was trying to play a little bit too fast tonight, not quite playing within himself. And maybe his great game in that first exhibition game, kind of gave him maybe too much confidence, and he needs to settle back into his role. But I really thought for a guy who his value is going to be in understanding his role, not turning the ball over, being solid, and being a steadying influence for a young team, I thought he stepped outside of that tonight and was actually more jittery and erratic than a lot of the other guys, especially a freshman like Rob Johnson, which I thought contributed to a really uneven performance from him. What did you think of Nick tonight?
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. I think that if he's got the ball, with his back to the basket, 6 feet out, very often we're going to be in trouble. I don't expect there to be many games this season where he goes 0 of 6 from the field. He's got a great shot, and he is really smart at when to take it tonight. I just thought he forced it a few times. But also now, after that first exhibition game, I mean, the secret's out. The guy can hit shots. Nobody's going to give him an easy look this year. I don't think that's going to happen. He's going to get his shots off ball reversal and, sort of the same way you saw Jordan Hulls get his shots. I mean, Zeisloft obviously can get his shot off more easily than a guy like Hulls can because of his size. He's 6'4", good 210 pounds. But he's going to get the ball off of ball movement, reversals, guys driving in and kicking out. He's not going to be the guy that drives in and opens up shots for anyone else, I don't think. And I think that he's still learning his role a little bit. I think that also, maybe he played a little more tonight than he had 30 minutes, played a little more tonight than we're going to see in the regular season. You're going to see a guy like Stan Robinson in some. You're going to see a guy like Troy Williams maybe starting over Zeisloft. So you're going to see him come in and be a guy who is going to play off the ball and not be expected to drive the lane or anything else like that. He's going to get his shots from other people opening things up for him. So maybe it's just, an uneven sort of night. He had such a big game in the first game. He felt like he needed to do more this week, and that's really not what we need him to do. We need him to hit shots when the ball finds him off of ball reversals or off of driving kick, and be a guy who's going to help space the floor, not a guy who's going to be creating on offense, because I just don't think that's his game.
Yeah, and Zasov did have 5 turnovers. I was right on that. A couple interesting numbers here. So, Andy, typically, if you're just joining us or this is your first time on the show, typically once the regular season games start, we send out a newsletter the day after games, and Andy Bottoms provides really detailed, in-depth analysis of Tom Crean's substitution patterns, the plus-minus, kind of on a micro level each game and then on a macro level for what the trends are for the season. Make sure you get on our email list. It's obviously free. We're not going to spam you with anything. It's just solid Indiana basketball information at all times. assemblycall.com/subscribe. Get on there before the regular season starts. And for that first game, we didn't send it out as an email, but Andy did tweet it because, he's a nerd like that and went through and did the stats anyway for the exhibition game. And Hunter Perea had the best plus-minus on the team in that first game, which makes a lot of sense because Hunter played well, and you would think that our best lineup would include our main big guy who's active right now. Interesting stat tonight, and I'm looking at this on the scacchoops.com site, which provides great advanced stats during the game. Hunter actually had the worst plus-minus on the team tonight, according to these stats, at -6, which is very interesting. He did obviously, play a little bit less this game, I think, than he played the last game. James Blackman was the highest at 13, at a +13. And guess who was next? If you had to guess who was next, it's a guy that I wanted to talk about. I meant to talk about him at the start of last show at the beginning. Who do you think was next in the plus-minus?
Well, I know it was.
Oh, because you're looking at it right now. All right. Well, you could have humored me anyway.
Oh, well, sorry.
Yes. Okay. Now, and here's what I loved about Colin Hartman's performance tonight is, it's amazing how, the first part of the first half and the first part of the second half tonight were so similar. I mean, Indiana got off to just a terrible start tonight. They were down 17-6 at the first TV timeout, then 21-15 at the second TV timeout, and 28-20 in the first TV timeout of the first half. And in the second half, again, the University of Indianapolis, they outscored Indiana for the first couple TV timeouts. Well, what really turned it around in each half is when Colin Hartman came in the first half, he made a 3, had a block, made some really nice hustle plays, and made a couple big plays in the second half when he got in there that really sparked this team. Now, once Indiana has its full complement of players, Stan's back, Troy's back, Emmett Holt is in the rotation, Colin Hartman is not going to be this team's sixth man. But I think what he did show tonight is that he has the wherewithal, the awareness, and the skill, and clearly the health now with his knee, to come in and make plays. Now, will he be able to do it when the game's a little bit faster? We'll see. But for at least one night, I was really impressed with his ability to come in and make an impact. And not, you see a lot of times guys coming off the bench, maybe they wait for the game to come to them. I thought he was really aggressive and put himself in the game and made some big plays for his team.
Yeah, I thought that his activity level, I think that was the key tonight for him. He was all over the place. He was, he's got to rebound better, I think, than he did tonight. He got pushed out of a few rebounds. But I think that his positioning on defense, his ability to close down when he was helping from off the ball was great. He had a couple blocks. He moved the ball well on offense. Just very active, and in lulls in the game where the team looked a little slow or sort of out of sorts, I thought he came in and provided a really nice spark. Like you said, I'm not sure how much he's going to play during the regular season, but it's nice to know you have that option of a guy who's going to come in and provide you some energy, and also a guy who can knock down a shot if he's open. I thought that was encouraging too, that he's that he trusts his stroke after coming back from a knee injury enough to knock down 2 threes. And I thought he played a very good game, and I thought he stood out for sure. When you're looking at the list of the guys in this game who made an impact, I think he stood out really well. But when the other guys are back, it's going to be interesting to see how he fits in the rotation. But the good thing is that we have competition on this roster right now, and he's fighting for minutes. And guys tend to go above and beyond when they realize that they have a chance to play and that they need to, put in that extra effort to get on the court. And right now he's getting a really good chance to show what he can do with the other guys out.
So one of the things for me that I've found myself continuing to think during these two exhibition games is that when Indiana's had really good teams, they typically win their exhibition games by 35 to 50 points. I mean, they are typically blowouts that are not close. The backups are playing, a lot of the second half, and Indiana's just winning in a rout. Now, both of these games, obviously, were hotly contested early on. Indiana was able to pull away in their first one, and tonight they were never really able to kind of, get out of that 13 to 16 point lead. But let's remember, Indiana's not playing at full strength. So if you put two athletes and capable scorers like Stan Robinson and Troy Williams on the floor for these two games, so they more approximate what Indiana's full roster is going to be, how do you think Indiana does in these games? I mean, are those two athletes, do they help push Indiana over the edge so they're winning these games by 30, 40 points so that what we're going to see with our full roster more closely approximates a good to, perhaps really good Indiana team? Or do you think that this is just an Indiana team that wins its exhibition games by 20 to 25 points and is going to start struggling when the competition gets a little bit bigger and is going to struggle to beat better teams?
I think you have to look at the fact that Max Hotzel played 12 minutes. He's coming off an injury and wasn't really expected to do much in the exhibition season or play that much this year. He's supposed to get bigger and become a better rebounder. You got Tim Priller as one of your first guys off the bench playing 5 minutes. I mean, you've just got guys coming in key situations. I mean, Colin Hartman, again, a guy we weren't expecting to even play for a few more weeks because he was coming back off his knee injury, playing 18 minutes. So I think it's really hard to judge because, like you said, they're very thin. And you're seeing, 7 or 8 guys available for these games. And I think that it's really hard to judge. Do I think that Stan and Troy would make a difference? Absolutely. I think that the first game in particular would have fit Troy Williams' strengths perfectly, which is getting out on the floor, running, making athletic plays at the hoop. I think that he's going to be a big part of the rebounding this year because of his athleticism, and he'll be more disciplined on the defensive end of the floor just by being a year older. But you're seeing a lot of new guys and a lot of young guys play, and things get raggedy early on, especially. I mean, guys like Robert Johnson and James Blackman Jr. are going to make mistakes because they're freshmen. Nick Zeisloft is still getting comfortable in the offense and still fitting in with these guys. Yeah, they had the Canada trip and he had the off season, but it's different when you're at Assembly Hall and the ball's tipped up. So you're also getting a guy in Hunter who's a junior but hasn't played very much. I mean, he's playing tons of minutes. So I think that there are factors like that make it so these exhibition games are a little more competitive. Whether Troy or Stan would make these a 40-point game, I don't think so, but I think they would make them more comfortable, leads and wins for Indiana, just because of what they can do in the open floor, like you said, the way they attack the rim, capable scorers, and I think that Stan is one of our better perimeter defenders. I also think that Troy Williams will be better this year. I thought he was one of our worst defenders last year. I think just because of experience and having caught up to the speed of the game, he's going to be better at that this year. Not saying he'll be an elite defender, but he's got the athleticism to be at least competent or solid in that role. So I think that they would certainly help. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Whether these would be 40-point blowouts where you've got all the walk-ons in with 10 minutes left, I don't think that's necessarily true. But, another thing that won't get mentioned is Emmett Holt missing these games is so key for him because we expect him to be in the lineup down low and getting rebounds. That's his specialty, is being a rebounder. And especially now with Devin Davis, his future completely unknown, you've got a guy who needs to be in there and in the mix and getting, in the game, especially in these exhibition games. And we haven't been able to do that. And that's a problem. And that, he's going to be learning on the job as soon as he comes back because we're going to need his size and his rebounding ability as soon as possible.
Could not agree more. Let's spend some time here in a moment talking about our two freshman guards, Robert Johnson, James Blackman. Before I do that, real quick, I want to send some kudos out. This game was on the Big Ten Network tonight. It was a student broadcast by Indiana Student U. William Chukerman, I hope I get that name right. William Chukerman and Adam Cohen were on the call. Sarah Ann Beeson, there's the sideline reporter. I thought all three of them were outstanding. I thought the production was excellent, and I thought if I hadn't known that it was a student production, I wouldn't have really been able to tell the difference from a normal Big Ten Network production, which is a credit to the guys at Indiana Student U. I know Galen Clavio, our friend from Crimson Cast, has really been a mentor to them and helped kind of teach them and coach them through some of this process as well. So congrats to him. I know it's a proud moment for him. So just kudos to those guys. And I love how the Big Ten Network does that. I mean, at the end of the day, these are college sports. The Big Ten Network is it's an organization that's promoting college athletics. So I really like that they give the students a chance to to shine in moments like this. And I just want to address with you real quick, Ryan. Is Indiana a broadcasting school or a print journalism school now? What do you think?
Indiana is and will always be a print journalism school. The Indiana Daily Student for life.
Thought maybe I could get you a little riled up there, get you on another rant. But truly, what?
Zach Osterman, Eamon Brennan. Who else? We got people all over the country. Matt Glenesk with the Indy Star, my buddy. Who else? Rick Bozich. Come on, you can't beat with the legacy.
No, I know.
Myself. Come on now.
Hey, you know what? We don't need any Indiana on Indiana crime here. Let's just say that Indiana's basketball team, broadcast journalism, print journalism, all great job. But tonight, clearly the emphasis was on the guys doing the broadcast for this basketball game. And, of course, all the people I didn't mention who were there involved in the production, all the behind-the-scenes guys. Excellent job. Kudos to all of you guys for a great broadcast. Let's talk about Rob Johnson and James Blackman. The big story coming out of the first exhibition game was how great James Blackman was. I spent the last few days wondering if James Blackman's ceiling is Steph Curry. You can think that's ridiculous or respond to that in a moment. Just in terms of how he plays and if he reaches the full potential of his ceiling, I see your face. Could he be that good? And I don't know if that's ridiculous or not, but it's a topic of conversation. Now, he's a freshman, so he was up in his first game, and I thought, what do you have tonight? 14 points, I think? He had 14 points tonight. An assist, a few rebounds, but was just uneven. He was 5 of 15 from the field. It wasn't that effortless scoring like we saw in the first game. But what we did see tonight, I thought, was just a stellar performance from Rob Johnson, and we covered it a little bit. But I think it bears mentioning again. 15 points, 10 boards, 3 assists. He only had 2 turnovers. He was 6 of 6 from the field, including 2 of 2 from downtown. Now, we know that Rob's shooting is going to be up and down, like it was in Canada, and to a certain extent like it was in high school. But the one thing that we learned in Canada, the one thing I learned talking to Ryan Marable, his coach, his high school coach on the Inside the Hall podcast, is this is a guy who is always going to contribute positively because he plays hard on defense, he's got good basketball savvy, and he's just one of those guys that, kind of like Victor Oladipo, even when Victor's shot wasn't going in, before he kind of got it early in his career, he just did positive things. He contributed positively to wins. And I thought that's what we've seen from Rob in the first 2 games. So talk about those 2 guys. I think James Blackman's been, obviously his highs are a little higher, but perhaps his low is a little lower with a struggle like tonight, whereas Rob Johnson is more just steady, straight production, very consistent.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Rob Johnson's going to be a very good player for us. I think that his big contribution this year is going to be steadiness. Like you said, I think that he's a guy who is a good shooter, not a great shooter. James Blackman Jr. is a great shooter, and I think James Blackman is the best freshman guard we've had since Eric Gordon. I don't think there's any question about that. I also think that because he's a freshman, you are, like you said, you're going to see up and down performances from James Blackman. That's fair. That happens to every freshman. I mean, I don't care who you are, that's going to happen to you. Tonight, 5 of 15 from the floor for James Blackman. I didn't really have a problem with a lot of his shots. I thought he forced a few threes too quickly, and I thought that when he got into the paint a few times, he just kind of hoisted quickly without settling himself, which is a problem. And, again, he'll watch the film and understand that and gain an understanding of what he should and shouldn't do going forward. That said, Steph Curry, he's a very good shooter, James Blackman Jr. I don't think he's on Steph Curry's level, and I also don't think he's quick. He's as quick with the ball and as quick on his feet as Steph Curry. That said, he could be an NBA lottery pick. There's no question about that, I think. I think talking to some people, they maybe think that he's a one and done guy. I think he could use 2 years to round out his game and get better on the dribble. Um, we saw
Yeah, but are
tonight.
you going to get our hopes up? Last year, you were saying Noah's staying for 2 years, and you got all of our hopes up, and then we saw what happened. So don't give us false hope.
Hey, look, we all know the story with Noah, and I don't need to
I
rehash
know.
that.
Just messing with you.
Yeah. Watch it. But Blackman, I think, is a kind of guy who really needs to work on his ball handling and really needs to work on that aspect. He needs to, at his height, he needs to be able to play both guard spots, especially looking forward to an NBA future. You saw tonight in one of the where University of Indianapolis went into a press and he was bringing the ball up and he immediately went backwards and towards his own baseline and was looking for Yogi immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got to be able to get through that, and that'll take time. He's a freshman. He's used to playing in high school. But yeah, going backwards is the exact wrong thing to do against a press. So yeah, he has some improvement to make. He's an amazing jump shooter. He's a really good finisher, and he's certainly improved on both of those aspects since high school when he was already good at that. As far as being a well-rounded offensive player. As far as Rob Johnson, I think that you're going to see him continue to play a very steady game. You're not going to see him take a lot of shots he shouldn't take, and I think that he's a great ball handler, and he hasn't really unleashed it yet, but he has an amazing crossover move that I think Indiana fans are really going to like when he does start using it and getting to the hoop more often. But you're not seeing him really dominate the ball, but you're seeing him initiate the offense, bring the ball up a few times, and I think he'll be doing that a lot this year as we move forward.
All right, so we got a question here on the YouTube page from Jamie Crocker who asked, so does Rob Johnson steal a starting spot from Stan Robinson? So there's a couple of things with that question. First, it assumes that Stan Robinson was going to be a starter, and to me, I guess, as I looked at the season, I kind of saw Stan as the sixth man anyway. But let's talk here. Let's talk lineup a little bit, and let's project forward. Clearly, Indiana has 2 games against Mississippi Valley State and what could be a really tough game against Texas Southern after that before we get to the SMU game, and that we'll be playing with the same complement of players. So we're going to have 2 more games of these lineups. But obviously, the majority of the season will be played at full strength. So let's project forward a little bit. Now, with what we've seen after 2 games, with the exhibition season done, once this team is back at full strength, here's my question to you. I'll go to you first, Ryan, and then I'll answer myself. Who's going to be the typical starting 5 for this team, but more importantly, who is the finishing 5? And the reason I ask that is because I don't know if Rob Johnson will start, but I bet you, especially as the season goes along, it's going to be really hard for Tom Crean to take him off the floor in key moments because of how much he does on both ends of the floor. So what do you think right now? What's your starting 5, and then what's your finishing 5?
I completely agree with that. I think Rob Johnson will be the finishing 5 towards the end of the season or maybe midway through the season. As far as starting 5 right now, I think obviously you've got Yogi and Hunter will be starting. I don't think there's any question. Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that from anybody. I also think James Blackman Jr. is going to be starting. Again, no question about that for anybody. James Blackman will be starting on any roster.
Those 3 are locked in. Those 3 are locked. And I think
Absolutely.
isn't Troy locked? I mean, to me, I even said before I thought Troy Williams was your dark horse first team All Big Ten candidate if he truly made a leap. And there's no way his athleticism you're taking off the floor.
Completely agree. I think the forwards will be. We're not going to have a traditional 2 forwards, 2 guards, and a center lineup. We're going to have 2 forwards and 3 guards, and the forwards are going to be Troy Williams and Hunter Perea. No question about it. And then you're going to have Blackman and Yogi. I think right now, maybe because of disciplinary issues, I think Stan Robinson is going to have to earn that starting spot. I don't think it's going to be handed to him. I think ideally he would take it because I think he's our best perimeter defender. Yogi's in there too, but he's a little shorter, so he's not as versatile. And
But isn't Stan really well suited to that sixth-man role? I mean, we've said that since last year because of his explosiveness and fearlessness on offense. And obviously, again, who starts isn't who finishes. So I like Stan coming off the bench personally.
I agree, but I also love what Robert Johnson will bring as the sixth man. So I'm kind of torn in that spot. Like, what do we do? Hey, Nick Zaislav could be the third starting guard. You never because of his maturity, and things like that. So it could be a backcourt of Yogi, Blackman, and Zaislav to start the season. Obviously, it doesn't really matter who starts. Like you said, it's who finishes and who plays the most. And I think people get too caught up in starting lineups.
Right. So okay. So who finishes? What is this team's best lineup as it looks right now? I mean, if you're in the final 5 minutes of the game to decide going to the NCAA tournament, who's your five? Matchup independent.
I think it's those four that we mentioned with Yogi, Honor, James Blackman Jr., and
Troy
Williams. And then I think it's between, for me right now, obviously the three guys who are in the mix are Nick Zeisloft, Robert Johnson, and Stan Robinson. I would probably err on the side of Robert Johnson, but I could be biased because of what I just saw tonight. Maybe you want Nick Zeisloft as your floor spreader, but defensively, I'd rather have Robert Johnson out there. So, I mean, really, we're going to have to see a lot more of these guys to make that announcement. But right now, I'd probably say Robert Johnson's the fifth guy I want on the floor. Just because.
Let me throw this in here real quick. So Nick Baumgart, who does great work statistically, just tweeted us, and he said his lineup is Yogi, James Blackman, Robert Johnson, Troy, and Hunter Perea. That is IU's best offensive team. Only Hollowell had a worse O rating last year than Stan. Which makes sense because Stan was clearly up and down. Not every game was like the Wisconsin game at home. I mean, he certainly had his moments where he wasn't productive.
And we have yet to see
how. Well, we have yet to see how shooting is, switching hands shooting is going to affect that. But as you said, I mean, you weren't talking about Stan for his offense. So you're kind of saying that, with Yogi, James Blackman Jr., and Troy out there, you've got the offense. You need Stan's perimeter defense.
Yeah,
and that's why he would be for you.
And I think one of the things that you saw Stan start to do last year was also drive in and finish. I mean, he became a really good finisher at the rim. The problem was that as the season went along, people just backed off him completely from shooting the ball. And again, he shot so poorly left-handed last year with his jumper, he switched hands, which you never see from a guard. You'll see post people switch hands. You will not see guards switch hands. And I did see him shoot some this offseason. He looks way more natural right-handed. It's not even close. Yeah, we're going to have to see. I mean, he's a completely new player on offense in regards to that. I agree. If you're going by last year's Stan, you do not have him in down the stretch unless you need a defensive stopper and unless you feel very comfortable with the other four guys on offense. The problem is that defensively, until he proves he can hit a jump shot, people are going to sag way off of Stan this year and clog the lane and help way off, which means that other guys are going to have trouble driving. So it's going to be interesting to see when he comes back how he plays. I mean, there are a lot of aspects of the season that are pretty fascinating, and these suspensions have only added to it because we don't get to see these guys right away. Troy Williams has a new jump shot that he's been apparently did great with in Canada. How is that going to translate to full games? I mean,
hey, he looked good shooting at the end of last year. I mean, and he was making them. It wasn't just that he looked better. I mean, they were going in.
Yeah, no, at times he did really have stretches where he played well. But it's still a question mark, and how comfortable is he? Is he comfortable enough with it where guys are going to have to defend against it and not play off him? Because we know Troy can drive by people and he's an elite finisher at the hoop. But what can he do, from 15 feet out? If he can hit that shot consistently, again, it's another aspect of Indiana's offense you have to defend against.
Tom Crean's substitution decisions are going to be fascinating this year. Which is going to make the season fascinating because few things are as much of a lightning rod for criticism and discussion as Crean's substitutions, which is a great time to plug again, assemblycall.com/subscribe. You're going to want to get in on Andy Bottom's analysis of the lineups this year because I think the lineups are going to be fascinating. I mean, we know, Hunter, I mean, whether he plays badly or well, Hunter's going to be playing 30 minutes a game unless he's in foul trouble. Like, there's just no other option. We know Yogi's going to be out there. Here's the thing, though. Stan last year we saw is streaky. I mean, there were some games where he was just really on and into it, and some games he was totally out of it. We have a 2-game sample size with Nick Zeisloft, and we've seen one great game and we've seen one poor game. I look at those two guys as where Tom Crean's really going to have, it's almost like kind of a manager with a pitcher. He's really going to have to kind of go by feel, right, and figure out, is this a good Stan game? Is this a bad Stan game? Is this a good Zeisloft game? Is this a bad one? But that one guy who I think, even as a freshman, I think is going to be steady, simply based on what we know of him from high school, what we've seen, is Rob Johnson because he contributes in all those areas, which is why I think as the season goes on, he's going to be your guy that emerges as, in terms of minutes, as being that guy who's maybe, 5th on the team in minutes and maybe even creeps up more. He's just, he's got that look of a guy that just helps you win basketball games consistently, and isn't going to have the highs and the lows, and he may not shoot very well, but he's going to get rebounds, he's going to get assists. Okay, let me ask you this. I have really liked what I've seen from him initiating the offense. Now, clearly Yogi's the point guard, and Yogi is better as a distributor, as a drive and dish type guy. But in the small samples that we've seen, I think Rob's done a really good job of initiating the offense. He had a great drive and dish to Honor today, and not forcing it and turning the ball over like a lot of guys did last year. What did you think of that, getting a second look at Rob initiating the offense, even with Yogi on the floor?
I think that he's good, but I thought that Yogi played really well tonight, so it was kind of, at times it was sort of like, oh, why are you taking the ball out of his hands? But I do think Johnson has that ability. I think he's got to continue to get better at, with his court vision and things like that, and that just comes from watching more tape and being more aware of where guys are on the floor and becoming more familiar with them, because he did miss some wide open guys when he was bringing the ball up the floor a few times. But I think that it's great to have that guy. Last year we didn't really have anybody who could bring the ball up when we wanted to play Yogi off the ball, or when he was on the bench. We didn't have a reliable guy to bring the ball up. So I think that that's a positive. I also think that he's a guy who is dangerous when he has the ball in his hands when he's bringing the ball up the court. He's not just looking to pass. He can get to the rim, and we've seen that. And he'll only get better at that as he gains confidence at the college level. So it's a positive having that guy. I don't know how much you want to take the ball out of Yogi's hands right now, but I think that being able to play Yogi off the ball, being able to run him off screens and get him open for looks from the perimeter or looks to drive are both positives. So we'll see what happens moving forward. Again, I think that Johnson played out of his mind great tonight, and we'll see if that's the norm. I don't think it will be. I think he'll be great, but not to this level. I mean, tonight he was basically perfect, and I don't think that'll be the what happens going forward. But I think he'll be very good, and he's a guy who can get you 10 to 15 in a given night, and he's going to rebound the ball well. We know from high school and watching video on him, he's a fantastic rebounder from the guard position. So seeing those 10 rebounds tonight, I mean, that might be high for him, but we know he's capable of that on any given night based on just his natural ability to rebound. So, yeah, I think that I think it's good having a guy who can initiate the offense when you want to get Yogi off the ball and when he needs to get a breather. But at the same time, I don't know if it's going to be something we go to for half a game or something like that, where it's something we rely upon heavily. But I do like that we have that option.
All right, let me take a quick break here from inducting Robert Johnson into the IU Athletic Hall of Fame before he's even played a regular season game. Let me talk about something real quick that concerns me. I'm just going to tell you my thoughts. You tell me if it's legit or talk me down off the ledge. I don't like how this team is starting off first and second halves, because I think it's great to have a deficit against Northwood and against the University of Indianapolis where you can go on a big run, erase that deficit, get the lead. But for a team, especially that down low, doesn't have a whole lot of depth, and that's going to struggle defensively, I feel like getting down like that can lead to some panic, can lead to some almost over-aggressiveness where you start fouling, and I just don't think it's going to be as easy to erase that deficit against better competition as it's been. Now, we know this team is going to be able to go on hot streaks on offense because they can shoot, they can penetrate. Like, we'll be able to score, and I think that we'll be able to stay out of a lot of the offensive droughts that we had last year. The problem is, at the start of halves, our defense has been really bad, and we may be just as prone to giving up big offensive streaks as we are going on, because when you combine, poor, lackluster defense at times, which we've had in these first two games, and poor rebounding, you're going to have a hard time getting stops consistently. And especially when that happens at the start of first and second halves, that puts you behind the eight ball in both sets of play. Last year, we saw this team start out first halves really well. And so a lot of times we would have the lead, and then the start of the second half would be really poor, but at least one of the starts was good. I'm concerned that this team has come out of the gates in the first half and the second half poor, and it seems like it takes them 4 to 8 minutes to get into the game, and against better competition, you just don't have that much time. So is this should we draw anything from the exhibition? Is it just early jitters for a young team, or is this something to be concerned about?
It's fair to be concerned about it just because there's not much to go on right now, so we have to kind of, it's fair to be concerned if it's happened twice in a row. Um, I don't think it'll be as big an issue when we get some of our veterans back, but still, yeah, it is concerning because you can't get down 20 points to Michigan State and expect to come back. 20 points early to someone like that, and playing a disciplined, athletic, aggressive Big Ten team and getting off to a horrible start is not tenable if you're going to try and compete in games. So hopefully these guys can watch tape of these first two games, see what their mistakes were. I think tonight they did have some issues defensively early, but also Indianapolis hit every shot they took. I mean, it's really tough to defend a team that's not missing, and
Yeah, but when you're leaving them open and giving up offensive rebounds, I mean, the shots they made at the start of the first half, the first three were all within the paint.
Yeah, and I agree, and that's what I was going to say is that they put themselves in that situation. So, I mean, it is concerning, and it's something we're going to have to look at, especially once it's no longer an exhibition game. You don't have the excuse of, well, okay, it's an exhibition game. Maybe they just weren't up for the start of the game or whatever. But so we'll see. In the first, when we tip off for real, if this happens again, then yeah, it's time to start getting concerned about it because they need to change something on the way they come out and the way they jump into the game and the way they get going and the way they, get set up offensively because we've been taking some bad shots on offense early on and not settling in, not moving the ball as much. We get into the flow, and it seems like late in the first half, once we're into the flow, we're moving the ball really well, getting open looks, easy buckets, things like that. But that doesn't come right off the tip, and it really needs to. I think we need to be a team that starts fast and plays fast.
So Jamie over in the YouTube chat says, I'm afraid teams like Michigan State will force us into situations where we look like Indianapolis looked against us for a while tonight, not being able to do much outside of chucking up threes. Hard to argue. I mean, this offense may look like that at times this year. The positive is that this team can actually make threes this year. So if we do get into a situation where we're shooting a lot of threes, you've got Yogi, you've got James Blackman Jr., you've got Zeisloff that you expect to be consistent three-point shooters. You've got Rob Johnson, who's capable. You've got Colin Hartman that can make them. You've got a guy like Hotzel who can make. So you've got guys this year, unlike last year, who can make them. But that's not really a sustainable way to win games in the Big Ten. So, when you get against teams that are going to be more physical and have bigger guys down low, like Michigan State with a Brandon Dawson and Wisconsin like a Frank Kaminsky, what's going to be that recipe for success for Indiana in games like that? Are we just going to have to hope that we shoot well, or what else can we do to kind of counterbalance these teams that can take advantage of our biggest weaknesses?
I think you're going to see a high-pressure zone defense, some that can pack in on the big guys and close out to shooters. It may look ugly at times, but I think that's going to be, if we really don't have another solid post option, is just Perea down there and Emmett Holt doesn't come along or Devin Davis doesn't come back, which I don't expect him to come back this year. You're going to see a lot of zone, I think, on those teams with big guys, and you're going to see a lot of clamping down, forcing teams to shoot from the outside, and then getting long rebounds and getting out on a break and trying to break out and run past them. I do think that the difference, or the way you stop yourself from just settling for bad threes, is ball movement, is driving and kicking, is moving the defense around, running off screens, cutting, passing, moving the ball. And this team can do that. We have a lot of guys who can handle the ball and who can pass it really well, and then who can hit it when they're open from three. So I think those are the keys to not being stagnant and being a team that just stands and shoots threes. Is you can shoot threes, but they got to be good shots, and they got to be off ball movement, and they've got to be off a driving kick, and guys being ready to shoot as soon as it comes to them. Not catch it, dribble once or twice, and then fire. You got to catch and shoot, and not rely so much on your driving ability or your dribbling ability to get you open. It's ball movement, it's using your teammates, and that's the key offensively for this team, I think, and it will be all year.
So, final question here before we lead into final thoughts. Do you think it's a coincidence that Andy couldn't make tonight's show and the Eagles were playing a Monday Night Football game? Thoughts?
I can neither confirm nor deny that statement, and I'm just.
We love you, Andy. But hey, if you're not here, we're going to talk. Okay, now here's the question. So Jerry Palm of CBS Sports came out with his preseason bracket which I can't really think of anything more ridiculous than a preseason bracket, but whatever. We're college basketball junkies, so we look at it anyway.
Just so you
Indiana
know,
is nowhere to be found.
just so you know, Andy is currently working on his preseason bracket.
Right.
So
And Andy would agree that okay, that's what I'm saying though. It is, I mean, for predictive value, it's worthless. It's like a preseason poll. That doesn't mean that we don't love it. That doesn't mean we don't look at it. So it has entertainment value, but for predictive purposes, no games have even been played yet. But point of this question, Indiana was nowhere to be found on Jerry Palm's preseason bracket. We've done this show now with Andy for 3+ years. Step into his shoes. Is Indiana in his first 32 out on his preseason bracket?
I believe.
What do you think he's thinking after these first 2 games?
I believe they'll be out of most brackets because this team hasn't proven anything yet. I mean, we lost a ton of players, got a ton of new players. I think a lot of people view the angle of the program as trending downward, and I don't think that. I mean, we're getting picked to finish 9th in the Big Ten. Yeah, the Big Ten is going to be strong this year, but most people are picking us to finish between 8 and 9. I think this team is capable of finishing much higher than that, and I think obviously we're capable of making the tournament. But I think that most people are going to jump on the bandwagon of, hey, they're not going to make it this year. This isn't the year. If we're going to talk hypotheticals of what that means for the program long term, we shouldn't do that because that's just, I mean, we just shouldn't go there. It's stupid.
No.
But I do think that most people are going to pick us to be out of the tournament just because the angle of the program to them is trending downward. Well, I think that it could turn around very quickly and be trending upward within a few weeks if we win a couple games. So we'll see. Look, if Indiana does reasonably well in the early season part of its schedule and the pre-Big Ten part of its schedule, we're going to definitely be a team that can make some noise in the Big Ten because we have a very tough pre-Big Ten schedule this year, unlike last year.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. Let's go on with some final thoughts then. We've gone for about an hour tonight, and again, Indiana wins by 13. Not a game to get overly excited about. There were some positives, some negatives. I mean, it's not really, I think, what you want from an exhibition game, but for a team that's so new, so depleted, from a fan perspective, it was a good game just to learn a little bit more about the team and, kind of figure out what this thing is going to be, although we're not really going to know until SMU when we get all the players back, and even then, that's the first game back, and they won't have played in a real game together, so it's going to... That's one of the problems with the way this season is shaping up, Brian, is I agree with you. If Indiana plays well in their non-conference, they'll set themselves up for success, and yet, they're really going to have to catch up quickly once Troy, Stan, and Emmett come back because they won't have all this experience, and, you're going to be putting in new pieces on the fly, so it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting. Talent is there, I think, for this team to make an NCAA tournament run. The other concern, too, and perhaps, I'll throw it to you on this so it can lead into your final thought, is that, with a young team like this and with a team that isn't going to have the benefit of the exhibition games in these first 2 games to gel, you're hoping that this team, late in January, in February, and early March starts to come together. And yet I feel like that's a constant theme. I remember last year on our preseason show we said, man, watch out for this Hoosier team. Jeremy Hollowell's the X factor, and Noah Vonleh is going to get better as the season goes along, and this team is really going to gel, and by February, watch out. And yet, kind of consistently with this program, we've seen the team start to peter out a little bit in February. And even the vaunted team when Zeller was a sophomore and Oladipo was a junior, that team went 4-4 down the stretch. And that was Tom Crean's best team. So, Crean teams in Indiana have a history of really fading in February, whereas you look at this team and you're thinking, okay, it's going to take a while for the parts and pieces. You got some young guys. February is when they should really get going. I guess that gives me a little bit of concern that the team's going to struggle right out of the gates once everybody comes back at SMU. We have this history to tell us there's going to be a lull at the end of the season. Kind of leads you to think they better make hay in December and January if they're really going to do anything in March.
Yeah, again, this is such a completely different team than last year. It's really hard to make comparisons or really make judgments about what we've seen so far and what we will see because
we said that last year too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what I'm saying, and it's a completely different situation, completely different guys, and you've had maybe more chemistry with this team, but at the same time, maybe not as much experience and things like that. You don't have a Will Sheehey who's been around for 4 years, and a guy who's known for his effort and can try and set an example that way. But again, you have new blood that is clearly looking to make an impact, like Zeisloff, like Johnson, like Blackman, and maybe even Colin Hartman. Playing really hard to try and make an impact. So it's it's just there's so many unknowns right now because we're missing so many guys, and we're not seeing necessarily what's going to be on the floor even in a few weeks. I mean, we could have completely different rotations in a few weeks than we've had so far. My final thought for tonight really is just I think, again, this team struggled early, bounced back, played really well in the middle 20 minutes of the game, I thought. Coming out of halftime, they didn't play great, but they still kind of had some spurts here and there and distanced themselves from Indianapolis. I think that this is a team that's going to be learning on the fly, as we've said all night, and hopefully these guys are taking advantage of this opportunity these young guys are taking advantage of the opportunity to really get in there and show what they can do in practice and during games, and maybe that means that we'll have a deeper team when the rest of these guys get back. As for now, it's really hard to tell what we've got with this team, missing 3 guys who should be key in the rotation in a few weeks. So a win in an exhibition game, not really a big deal. But yeah, like we said, you've got to start better, and these guys have to take advantage of the opportunities they're given with the other players out.
Yeah, final thoughts tonight. Obviously, the 22-0 run by Indiana was scintillating, and that happened from the 8-minute timeout, the under 8-minute timeout of the first half until halftime. Outside of that 22-0 run, Indiana was outscored by 9 points by the University of Indianapolis, which is over 32 minutes of the game. So for the majority of this game, Indianapolis outscored Indiana by a solid margin. For that one spurt, Indiana went on that 22-0 run. And so I think that's where my ambivalence about this game comes, because on the one hand, you saw what Indiana can be, albeit against lesser competition, but you also saw some of the struggles. And yet at the same time, as you mentioned, Ryan, we're playing with that depleted roster. I think Troy and Stan make a big difference in a game like this, and so it's hard to know. It's great to have had 2 basketball games to be able to watch and draw some conclusions from, or maybe inferences is better. I don't know that you can really draw any conclusions from a game like this, but I thought we saw some positives from Hunter. We've seen some ups from James Blackman Jr., Nick Zeisloff, and some downs from those guys. I think we've seen Yogi look a lot more comfortable as a facilitator than the guy who had to do it all on offense like last year. And I think most importantly for me, we see a guy like Rob Johnson who can be that kind of glue guy that just consistently contributes positively to to competitive efforts, which is good to see. So I don't know. I don't really know what to take from tonight's game because it was so up and down. It's just kind of a blah game, a blah effort from Indiana to me. I was hoping for more. And yet the high of the game, the 22-0 run, was probably better than I expected, but the other 32 minutes were somewhat disappointing. So, it just leaves me a little bit ambivalent, and we go into Friday night against Mississippi Valley State. The games count now, and so it's time now for Indiana to start playing well. And these first 2 games, Mississippi Valley State, not a great team. Texas Southern, that's obviously former IU coach Mike Davis. I know, I don't remember the guy's name, but they got word that a good player is going to be eligible for them. I guess there was some question about that, so he'll be playing. I don't know all the details there, but it just means they'll have a stronger team. That's not going to be any cakewalk. But for Indiana to really do what it wants to do this season, it needs to find a way with the depleted roster that it has for these 2 games to go 2-0. And if they can do that, I'm not really interested in style points with a depleted roster and freshman guards playing so many minutes and Hunter Perea, basically having to just not foul because he can't get in foul trouble. We got to get these 2 wins and give ourselves a chance going into that SMU game for it to lead to a solid 3-0 start to the season. And just no excuses, got to find a way. And so, look, the team in the 2 exhibition games, they struggled early. They found a way to get victories. We got to hope they carry that forward to these 2 games. But I think we'll learn a little bit more in the Mississippi Valley State game. I think we'll learn a lot more in that Texas Southern game. So I'm excited to see what kind of effort this team brings and if they can build on these exhibition games. But a bit of a mixed bag, but still, it's fun that Indiana basketball is back. Always enjoy the games. And if nothing else, this is going to be an interesting season, a fascinating season. Make sure you get on the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe. so you can get all the lineup analysis as we go through the season. With that said, I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Thank you to my co-host tonight, Ryan Phillips. Thank you to everybody who watched, listened, and asked questions. We'll be back Friday night after Indiana takes on Mississippi Valley State with another episode of the Assembly Call. Hopefully it's a victorious episode and the Hoosiers start out 1-0. Until then, everybody, have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.